At 8:17 a.m., my perfect house confessed. Sunlight sliced the bedroom into obedient stripes, the coffee maker hissed like a patient snake, and under the tile a lie warmed its hands. I'm Imani Brooks, 35, a graphic designer, curator of crisp white trim and rose bushes near Zilker Park. And today I learned a postcard can hide a crime scene. Malik, my husband of 16 years, slept with his back turned, his phone caged beneath his palm like a living secret. I watched the pulse in his wrist beat against glass and counted to 10 until my heart obeyed. When I slipped from bed, the floorboards answered with small confessions. In the kitchen, the machine breathed and steam made halos above ordinary things. The first ping came before the first sip. Malik padded in, wearing only shorts, eyes fogged, thumb already waking the glass. Emails, he murmured, a catechism he knew by heart. New York, premieres, schedules piling up. He kissed the air near my temple and asked if I'd slept. Like a stone, I lied, tasting metal. He said we should eat first. I said I'd clean the bathroom. Someone has to be, I didn't say. The bathroom was bright and merciless. I snapped on gloves, turned the water, watched steam gather like witnesses along the mirror. I was scrubbing the grout when I saw it. A single blonde filament curled against the drain, pale as a whisper and bright as a flare. I stopped mid-breath. I have black hair. Malik has black hair. We live alone. The room narrowed to a tunnel with that hair pinned at the end. I pinched it, lifted it to the light, and for one clean second I felt nothing, the stillness before a glass shatters. Then heat rose under the gloves. I dropped it into the trash as if I could dispose of a thought. "Everything okay?" he called. "Perfect," I chirped, too fast, too high. A beat later he filled the doorway, coffee in hand, mouth soft with concern and something else I couldn't name. "You're pale," he said. "Sit. Eat." I smiled like a stage light and scrubbed harder, as if pressure could polish truth. He set the cup on the sink and squeezed my shoulder. "It's the weekend, Manny. Breathe." I nodded, but inside, something stopped holding. At the table, he whisked eggs with the ease of a man who believes in ordinary mornings. "Walk through Zilker later?" he offered. "Just us." "Just us" echoed like an empty room. I lifted the salt, set it down, and watched my fingers tremble. "You good?" he asked. Fork paused. "Great," I said, and swallowed air. I tried to be reasonable. Hair travels. Guests shed ghosts. Maybe I'd carried it home on a scarf from the market. But the world had tilted, just a degree, the kind you don't notice until your glass slides off the counter. Malik placed his phone face down between us, a small eclipse. "How was New York?" I asked as casually as I could counterfeit. He told glossy stories about light coups and press lines and colleagues I used to find glamorous. I nodded on cue, and in that nod I made a quiet decision. No more guessing against myself. No more swallowing doubt like medicine. After breakfast, he rinsed the pan and hummed a tune that didn't belong to our house. I carried our plates to the sink and looked past the window at our neat lawn, at roses pretending not to bleed. Inside, the day had already changed shape. I would start counting what moved when I wasn't looking. I would follow the smallest thread until it told me what it was attached to. I would not blink first. And if the truth had to be dragged into daylight by its hair, then I would be the one to take. By Sunday, the house had learned to whisper against me. The porch swing creaked a warning, the stair gave a jealous sigh, and the coffee maker hissed like it knew more than it should, while I moved through each room pretending not to hear the verdict it kept pronouncing. Malik showered with the fan roaring, white noise that felt like a built-in alibi, and when he came out, he shaved again, as if the mirror were an audience he needed to convince. He set his phone face down beside his plate, a small eclipse I couldn't look around. "You're quiet," he said, and I smiled the way a hostage smiles on television. "I'm listening," I answered, not specifying to what. He mentioned call sheets, a reshoot window, a producer who kept circling back, and I watched his thumb rest on the black slab like it belonged to someone else. After breakfast, I rinsed eggs from the pan while the window framed our roses, pretending not to bleed. The glove-tight feeling from yesterday hadn't loosened, just learned to fit. In the bathroom, I lifted the same shampoo bottle and felt its tiny confession, lighter by a breath, a measurable absence. I drew a faint scratch with my thumbnail along the plastic, my private ledger, and set it down in its ring of water exactly where it always lived. The mirror threw back a woman I half recognized, not hysterical, not calm, a scientist with a hammer. I texted Sade, "Coffee? Emergency level froth." She replied, 4 o'clock, "I'm bringing cross-examination energy." The day wore on with a kind of counterfeit normal. Emails answered, files exported, a presentation mocked up for a client who wanted playful grit, whatever that meant. But my focus hovered in the hallway, where the bathroom door breathed like a sleeping animal. At daily grind, the pastry case glittered, and I felt like a ghost among the sugar. Sade scanned my face with the unflinching tenderness of someone who has seen you cut your own bangs in college. "Tell me," she said, "no soft landing." I told her pieces: the blonde filament, the flipped phone, the fan that refused to stop singing, my scratch on the bottle like a heartbeat monitor. "What if I'm cool for thinking it?" I asked, "and stupid for not?" She stirred her cappuccino until the foam collapsed and said, "You're neither. You're awake. Hypothesis, method, proof. Look for patterns, not apologies." I laughed, small and brittle. "If I find proof, I lose everything." She tilted her head. "If you don't, you lose yourself." The line lodged under my ribs and wouldn't move. Back home, Malik's shoes were by the door, a tidy alibi, and his laughter leaked from his office, piped down a line that refused me a dial tone. I paused in the hall like an actress waiting on her cue, then crossed the stage without applause. The bottle's meniscus set a hair beneath my mark. Not dramatic, just undeniable. The difference between the sky being almost dark and actually night. I couldn't smell my herbal forest on his skin when he kissed my crown. I could smell a different soap, turning the air towards someone I hadn't met. "Walk later?" he asked, casual as loose change. "Just us." The words touched the floor and rolled under the couch. "Maybe," I said, and my voice sounded like a door closing quietly. After dinner, he hummed a tune our house didn't know, and I counted the beats I didn't recognize. I tried to list rational explanations, guests, a stray hair from a scarf, my own bad math, but they collapsed like sugar under rain. In bed, he slept on his side, hand cupped over his phone as if it were warm. I lay on my back and watched the shadow of the ceiling fan cut the room into quarters, while the decision inside me clicked into place, like a lens finding focus. No more arguing with smoke. I would follow the smallest thread until it admitted what it was tied to, even if I had to drag the truth into daylight by the hair. I didn't plan what I did next. It unspooled like muscle memory from a life I hadn't lived. By mid-morning, my mark on the bottle had slipped a breath, and suspicion hardened into experiment. If a ghost was bathing in my house, I wanted proof no apology could sand smooth. I grabbed my keys, told Malik I needed printer ink, and drove to the drugstore on South Congress where aisles glittered with discreet solutions. I walked past hydrating and clarifying promises to a low shelf of hair removal creams in shy pastels. I lifted a box, read warnings, set it down, lifted it again. "For legs and arms," it said, "silky in minutes." I pictured minutes turning into headlines and almost put it back, then saw, bright as a flare, that blonde filament in our drain. I slid the tube under paper towels and toothpaste, ordinary camouflage for an unordinary intent, and smiled at the cashier so convincingly I nearly believed myself. At home, I waited for the house to become a stage. Malik on a hushed call, door closed, voice lowered to velvet. I locked the bathroom, set the shampoo on the sink, and opened the tube. The smell was chemical and decisive, a sharp clean that erased my forest note. I squeezed a careful ribbon into the bottle, shook until textures married, and held it to the light like a chemist measuring a future. My hands trembled after it stopped. I wiped the counter twice, washed my fingers 3 times, returned the bottle to its ring of water, and cracked the window so the air could forget. In the mirror, I met my own eyes. A line had been crossed. I was still standing. At dinner, Malik said reshoot and premiere like rosary beads. I counted without meaning to, tally marks on a cell wall. He reached for my hand and I let him keep the shape, not the warmth. Walk, he asked. Just us? Maybe, I said. Night fell with the steadiness of a verdict. The shower ran. I watched the ceiling and tried not to imagine fingers unscrewing a cap, foam rising like a confession. Morning arrived patient and bright. I lifted the bottle with the prayer I didn't believe. It felt the same, close enough to doubt, and doubt stabbed worse than any answer. On the fourth afternoon, I raised it again and knew, the way thunder belongs to lightning even when you miss the flash. The meniscus sat cleanly below my notch, 2 finger widths of vanishing. Air thinned. Someone had stood under my water, worn my scent, and turned my shampoo to a blade. I sat on the tub's edge until the room steadied and thought of Sade's warning, lose everything or lose yourself, and understood the bargain was already drafted. That evening, Malik texted he'd be late. A long meeting spilled ellipses across the screen. I turned on the news for company I wouldn't have to answer, the anchors arranging worry into neat boxes. A name I knew from Malik's story slid across the crawl. The camera found an actress stepping into night as flashbulbs snapped. A silk scarf kept slipping. Wind lifted it and light found a pale, bare scalp, smooth as a question no one wanted to ask. The studio called it private. The panel mouthed illness and brave choices. The air in my chest said otherwise. If truth had a face, it was that frame. A stranger's crisis lit like a marquee while my house, at last, fell quiet. I lowered the volume and listened until even the pipes had nothing left to say in the dark. Over the next 48 hours, Austin felt like a town built from glass, every pane throwing my face back at me with a different question. And the story of the bald star kept blooming on screens the way a bruise blooms under skin, first faint, then impossible to ignore, while inside our house I moved as if the floor were wired, careful, listening for the click that gives away a trap. Neighbors waved. I waved back with hands that no longer belonged to me. Malik's schedule became a tangle of quick calls and last-minute notes, the kind of elastic hours that stretch far enough to hide a person inside them. He shaved twice in one day. He changed shirts to answer the door. He placed his phone face down even when it was charging, as if a sliver of light might betray him. On Sunday morning, I took the paper from the porch and didn't read it at first. I spread it on the kitchen table between our mugs the way you lay down a blade and pretend it's a spoon. The front page used words like mystery and courage and transformation, and the photo showed the actress touching the edge of her scarf with a smile that wasn't a smile, a person trying to hold her head on with grace while the world measured her for a plot. When Malik came in, he stalled at the threshold, pupils flicking to the headline, then to my face, and for one bright second, the old ease flared. He could have told the truth then, and I might have heard it without breaking. But the moment passed, a train that didn't stop. Wild, he said softly, reaching for his cup. Poor woman. I answered. Neither agreement nor mercy. He sat. The mug left a ring like a clock on the wood. Walk later? He asked, and I heard the plea inside the ritual. Maybe, I said. and the word felt like a held breath I was tired of holding. I cleaned the sink that didn't need cleaning, then stood at the bathroom door and watched steam ghost the mirror. In that fog, I could almost see a second silhouette, a quick hand, a bright head bowed against the spray. I touched the bottle and didn't lift it. I already knew enough to hate the weight of knowing. Sade texted a single word, updates, and I sent her a photo of the headline with no caption. She answered with a fire emoji, then a scalpel, then, "I'm 2 streets away if you call." I didn't call. Instead, I cooked too carefully, as if precision could make a life behave. Garlic sliced thin, onions sweated until translucent, pasta pulled 1 minute before al dente so it would finish in the pan. Malik ate like a man auditioning for the part of a husband who eats dinner. "You seem far away," he tried. "Closer than you think," I said, and watched the line hit him like cold water. After dishes, I stood by the window and timed the porch swing's creak to my breathing until both steadied. On television, a panel dissected the actress, her choices, the optics, the moment. Not one of them said someone, shower, married, but the words gathered anyway, invisible letters rearranging the air between our chairs. Malik rubbed at a stain that wasn't there on his jeans and cleared his throat. "Imani," he began, using my name the way people use a white flag. "Not tonight," I said, and the refusal felt like stepping onto a roof and choosing not to jump. The house went quiet around us, the special kind of quiet that means a sound is coming. And I understood that silence can be an instrument if you're willing to hold it long enough to hear what breaks first. By Tuesday night, the air in our house felt staged, like someone had taped marks on the floor telling us where to stand while we pretended to be ourselves. And I understood that waiting had turned into hiding. So I walked into the living room and flipped on the lamp with a click that sounded like a gavel. Malik looked up from the script he had been pretending to read, the red wine untouched beside him, his phone face down like an obedient dog under the table. "We need to talk," I said, and my own voice startled me with how flat it was, a calm surface stretched over deep black water. He tried to smile, warily. "Imani, I'm exhausted. Can we—" "No," I said, and sat opposite him, knees square, hands open, so he could see I was not carrying anything except the thing he had put between us. I told him about the hair, about the humming fan and the extra shaves, about the notch on the bottle dropping like a barometer before a storm, and the way the world kept airing a stranger's bald head while our house pretended not to know the name of rain. He rubbed his eyes, buying seconds. "It's not what you think," he offered, and the script on the table trembled because his hand was shaking. "Then help me think it right," I said. "Say the sentence you keep swallowing." For a long moment, only the porch swing answered. Then he breathed long and low and said, "It happened." A door opened, and every version of us we had ever been walked through it and left. Heat rose in my face. I kept my posture. "How long?" He stared at the carpet as if it might cue the line. "A few months." My mouth went dry. "In my shower," I said softly, "while I was home." He flinched. "It was a mistake," he whispered. "I love you." I shook my head. "Love does not use my shampoo, Malik. Love does not set its phone face down. Love does not let me find out on the evening news." He reached out. I stepped back before he touched me. 16 years, I said, tasting the number like iron. "I gave you my 20s, my tenderness, my quiet patience." His eyes brightened with panic, the way animals brighten just before they bolt. "I never wanted to hurt you," he pleaded. "Then why didn't you stop?" I asked. And the room answered with silence so pure it hurt my teeth. "We argued the way storms argue with glass.
Wind, shatter, stillness. He blamed stress, proximity, the gravity of bright people who never hear the word no. I kept returning to the small domestic facts, the filaments in the drain, the missing inches, the tune our house did not know. Because my life is built from details and his story had none I could live inside. At last I told him I was seeing a lawyer, that papers had beginnings as well as endings, and he blinked like someone waking in the wrong city. He tried to apologize into the shape of a future. I handed him the present. This ends, I said. Here. He stared at me as if the room had tilted, then stood slowly, palms open, a man approaching the cliff he finally sees. He nodded once, a tiny surrender, and took the couch without arguing. I washed an already clean glass and let the water run until it went cold. In the mirror above the sink, I did not look ruined. I looked returned home. I woke to a Wednesday that felt like a courtroom, sunlight cross-hatching the floor into exhibits while the coffee maker testified. And I knew the next right thing wasn't screaming or patience, but process. I showered, avoiding the bottle whose meniscus had become a metronome for betrayal, dressed in quiet black, and rode an elevator to a fourth-floor office where the carpet swallowed doubt. The attorney, Miss Chavez, hair clipped back, voice precise, listened like a surgeon. She didn't blink when I said the words, affair, shower, actress. She asked for dates, accounts, boundaries, asked if I feared him, and I surprised us both by saying I feared silence more. She slipped papers across as if they were flotation devices. Petition. Temporary support, she said, pen poised. I signed the way you sign before anesthesia, feeling the room tilt and steady. Outside, South Congress roared as usual, yet it sounded underwater. I watched people laugh in a taco line and realized my life had quietly rerouted while I stared at the detour sign. Back home, the house behaved. Still, every object felt opinionated. Malik texted, then called, then texted again. Messages stacking like a pleading choir. Can we talk? I'm sorry. I love you. I turned the phone face down, not as a weapon, but as rehearsal for a different life. At 3, my email pinged. Noah Reyes. He wrote that he'd heard whispers, that he wouldn't print a breath I didn't choose, that he believed in stories that cauterize instead of feed. I closed the laptop, opened it, closed it again, then typed, yes, to coffee, because if I was going to live in the open, I had to stop speaking into my own cupped hands. We met at a corner cafe. He arrived alone, no camera, no predatory smile, just a notebook he didn't open. Tell it the way your body remembers, he said, and something unknotted. I started at the hair, moved to the notch on the bottle, confessed the tube in the bag, the shake in my wrist as I poured, the way headlines sound like applause and sirens at once. When I reached the moment she stepped into flashbulbs with her scarf slipping, I didn't cry. I felt steadier, as if I'd finally found bedrock. Noah's questions didn't prod. They made room. He warned that publication would pull my life through a keyhole, that people would doubt me, praise me, hate me. Do you want that light? He asked. Sade's voice echoed, patterns, not apologies. I want air, I said, and watched him understand. Back home, sunset lacquered the roses. Malik's car wasn't in the drive. The house breathed only my breath. I carried a box to the bedroom and folded with reverence. The sweater from our second winter, the concert tee he stole and I kept, photographs that proved we had once been tender. I set aside my wedding band and felt the dent it had made, a soft crescent of history. The phone rang. I let it. I texted Sade, filed. She replied with a heart, then, proud of you. I stood at the sink with the window open, listened to kids argue about a soccer ball, and realized I wasn't the center of a scandal, so much as someone walking out of a fire with eyebrows singed and spine intact. Night came without ceremony. I lay in bed and let the dark climb the wall like ivy. And for the first time in weeks, I slept before 100, dreamless, unguarded, as if a jury finally filed back and whispered the verdict I needed. Begin.
The article landed on a Friday with the dull thud of the morning paper and the bright sting of a flashbulb. My name nested under a headline that made my stomach lift and drop like an elevator. And suddenly, my private house had windows on every side. I poured coffee with hands that remembered how to be steady and read my own words twice, 3 times, until they felt like a case I had tried and won simply by telling it straight. The filament in the drain, the notch on the bottle, the chemical ribbon, the silence that grew teeth. Outside, the neighborhood did what neighborhoods do. Sprinklers clicked, a dog barked at nothing, a stroller squeaked. Yet when I stepped onto the porch, I felt watched by the idea of watching, as if attention were a weather system you could sense on your skin. My phone began to vibrate in small, insistent pulses. Unknown numbers, a blocked call, a message from my mother that started with baby and ended with call me when you can. Texts from Sade stacked like handrails. Proud of you. Need snacks? Want me to run interference? And, threaded between them, Malik's attempts at narrative control. I never meant to. We can fix this. Please don't do this to us. I turned the screen face down on the table the way I'd learned from him, not to hide, but to unhook. Emails followed like weather alerts. A television booker with teeth made of exclamation points. A podcast that wanted the raw, unfiltered truth. A women's nonprofit offering a support group and a lawyer I'd already met in a different office. Noah's subject line was a single word. Here. And his body 2 more. With you. I wrote back thank you and meant it so completely I had to stand at the sink and breathe over the basin for a full minute. At the corner coffee shop, the barista slid my latte toward me with a look too gentle for caffeine. At the next table, 2 strangers spoke the actress's name in careful voices, and I learned, all at once, how to be a room that holds water without leaking. Back home, I opened comments in small doses like medicine and found a crowd both kinder and crueler than I'd prepared for. Women whispering, "Me too," men advising forgiveness as if it were free. Trolls sharpening themselves on the idea of my mouth. I closed the window before any of it could calcify into a chorus. In the afternoon, Noah called, voice low and unhurried, the opposite of television. He said readers were writing to say the piece felt like oxygen, that it didn't gawk so much as map, that sometimes maiming a pattern is the only way to break it. "How are you?" he asked, and I surprised us both by answering, "Hungry," which made him laugh softly before he asked if I'd eaten, if I wanted to walk, if I needed quiet. We met at Zilker near the footbridge where the wind lifts your hair without asking. He kept his hands in his pockets, and I kept mine around a paper cup that had stopped being warm. We didn't talk about Malik or Lena at first. We named trees and dogs and clouds that look like continents, and I realized that relief has a sound. Shoe on gravel. Breath syncing with someone who doesn't need you to perform. When we finally touched the story, we did it like people handling porcelain. I told him my mother cried and then got practical, that Sade had already drafted a list called Do Not Read, that I'd moved my ring to a dish by the sink and felt my finger learn its weight again. He told me the newsroom smelled like old coffee and wet ink, that the copy desk argued over my comma like it mattered more than outrage, that sometimes the only ethical act is to make a clean space around a hard sentence and let it stand. We walked until dusk ironed the sky, and I could say, without breaking, that I was not ruined. I was revised. And revision, I was learning, is a kind of authorship I could. Spraying arrived like a soft verdict, not innocent or guilty, but possible, and Austin rinsed itself green while my life found a new axis.
The decree came by mail in an envelope thin as a breath, and when I slid it open at the sink, sunlight cross-hatched the letter into something both official and merciful, a stamped permission to stop living inside a wound. I set my ring in a shallow blue dish and felt my finger learn its original grammar. I changed the towels, bought a soap that smelt like citrus instead of forest, and repotted the plant in the bathroom so its roots could stop circling and make a different map. Sade arrived with a grocery bag full of bossy snacks and a list titled, "Do not read, do not reply, do drink water." She sat on the porch swing and declared it mine in a voice that left no room for negotiation. The actress slipped from headlines the way a bruise fades, visible if you know where to look, otherwise just skin. And when I saw her once in a magazine with a clean buzz cut and a steady gaze, I surprised myself by feeling nothing theatrical, only a cool, distant compassion for a stranger caught in a machine I had briefly helped jam. Malik texted exactly twice after the decree, practical notes about the couch and the mixer, and I answered with coordinates and receipts. Closure turned out to be less like a conversation and more like returning library books on time. Work returned in small, generous bites: a rebrand for a local bakery, a flyer for a river cleanup, a layout that made me remember why grids are a kindness when the world insists on chaos. Noah and I kept walking, first because motion made room for air, then because it made room for laughter. He never touched me without asking, never asked without leaving space for no, and the permission inside that patience felt like a room with windows on every side. We learned each other's small weather, my habit of lining up pen before I can think, his way of reading the last page of a novel before he commits to the first. We sat on blankets at Zilker while dogs reintroduced themselves to the river and named clouds again, because some rituals deserve to be silly if they want to last. One evening, thunder muttered somewhere south, and we took shelter under the footbridge. The air smelled electric, and my heart didn't. "Do you trust me?" he asked, not as a pledge, but as a temperature check. "Not yet," I said, and watched him nod with relief, because truth is lighter to hold than hope in a costume. Later, when I finally slept beside him, I did it like someone borrowing a library book, carefully, gratefully, ready to return it in good condition if I had to. At home, the house began to sound like itself again. The porch swing's honest creak, the coffee maker's soft hiss, the pipes knocking exactly when they meant to, and the bathroom stopped being a courtroom. I kept the bottle with the notch for a while, then threw it away on a Thursday without ceremony, because some relics are just plastic once they lose their job. I told my mother I was okay and meant it. I told myself I was not a cautionary tale, but a craftsperson of aftermath, and the sentence felt like a handle I could carry. On the first truly hot afternoon, I lay on the rug and let the fan chop the light into steady squares. I thought about the girl who married at 19 and the woman who signed at 35, and I didn't pity either of them. I poured water, called Sade, texted Noah a picture of the sky, and said aloud to no one and to everyone, I am not ruined. I am revised. And revision, it turns out, is just another word for beginning.